You guys ever lose a round to some dude who's just sitting in hell on Ascent? He's literally just hanging out, and your duelist runs it up heaven instead of clearing hell. It happens on B site too. They're just sitting in boathouse, and your duelist full sprints into spawn. They don't even go on site. You're even lucky if they press the button to shut the door. They just sprint into spawn. This is all part of a bigger issue, to be honest, though. It's not just duelist players that skip steps. Initiators do it too. You ever try to rush B and your whole team just dies in B main because your breach didn't stun, your Sova didn't drone, or your Omen didn't blind? It's like your team just assumed B main would be free. You need to take these things step by step. You can't take the site until you've taken B main, and you can't plant the spike until you've taken the site. A lot of times, players just won't clear things. Your duelist will just double satchel into elbow on bind without helping you clear sight. You need to recognize that your team needs you. You have to take things step by step. You cannot skip steps on these entries just for the sake of going fast. This applies to every single player on their team with pathing and utility, although honestly, duelists and initiators are the main culprit. You gotta do your job and keep your team safe. This is just one of the first of 7 low elo mistakes you're making every single game that is holding you back. In this video, we're going to be going over 6 more crucial mistakes that you can fix today to help you instantly start ranking up. Moving on to mistake number 2, players oftentimes try to do way too much. They're constantly trying to switch things up. You'll notice this especially if you ever get into a flow with winning rounds and start calling strats. For example, let's say you're playing on Haven and you call for a C push. You get a really awesome C push and then you think, oh, that worked really well. Now let's do a C split through garage. So you do a C split and go through garage, getting 2 wins like that. And then you decide, okay, now let's do a B play. So you go B and maybe that works. And you think, okay, let's go A. So you try to go A and it's not as good, but you take the site and play it. And then you decide, let's go do a B fake and we'll go into C. What players are missing is that it's not always because you're calling these crazy strats and catching them off guard that all this stuff is working. It's probably working because there's a hole in their play, whether you see it or not. The skill in calling strats is being able to pick out that hole that they have and take advantage of it. You don't want to be doing all sorts of random stuff just because these are strats that you can think of. You want to do things that make sense based on how your opponents are playing. For example, it doesn't necessarily matter if you won 3 straight rounds on C. The best play in this scenario could just be to slam C again. Maybe their C defense just really sucks. You hit C 3 times in a row, it worked all 3, maybe you could still do it a 4th or 5th time. There's no reason to switch it up just because you feel like you need to do something new. Plainly put, you don't need to fix what's working. Players are often focused too much on being surprising and catching opponents off guard, rather than focusing on what is good and what works. What is our team comp good at that the enemy team will have trouble stopping? That's normally what's going to be the best for you. Eventually, if you do that enough and they end up stopping you, then you can adapt and set up a backup plan. Maybe even set up a lurker in the 4th round so that if you see something that you don't like, then you could pivot into something different. But don't get mixed up and think that the secret to ranked is calling these crazy strats to win games. Just keep it simple. That's actually a lot of what we focus on here at SkillCapped. We simplify the game so that players like you can climb stupid effectively in any elo of the game. Valorant is hard, but it doesn't have to feel so hard. With our world-class courses, we make it easy for anyone like you to start climbing, no matter your rank. With our Aim God course, Movement course, and our Road to Diamond climb, you'll have everything that you need to rank up or your money back. We actually guarantee that you will climb 500 rating while using our service, or you don't pay. If you want to see where 500 RR would land you, definitely check out our free rank calculator over at SkillCapped using the link in the description. But other than that, let's get into mistake number 3. So this is mistake number 3, and man, low elo players do this a lot. You're forgetting to say good enough when it comes to your decisions. A lot of times, people just have lineups or setups or positions that they're really attached to. They feel like they always need to fire their Sova dart from a specific lineup, or they always need to place their Viper wall from a specific place, or they always need to place their Omen smoke in that one spot. They always need to do that one specific setup on Killjoy. But sometimes just getting a little bit of value out of your abilities is totally fine, especially if you're already winning. I actually got a coaching session from a tier 1 pro about a year ago, and I asked him about this when I was playing Gecko. I said, sometimes I feel like I'm throwing my utility on Gecko, and I don't know when it's worth it for me to pick it up, and when I should leave it on the ground and regroup with my team instead. It's really easy to get pulled towards picking up your utility on Gecko. It's almost like it calls to you when it's on the ground. Frequently is not the correct decision to actually pick it up. Sometimes it feels like you're going to want that extra flash, and sometimes you're not. And that's kind of the answer to the question. Are you going to need this flash later in the round? Is it worth it to greed and pick this up and miss out on the potential timing that you need to get on site and trade your teammate, or maybe to not be in position for a specific thing happening. For example, you use your flash on a default and your whole team is rushing into site. Do I pick up that flash or do I go with my team? Sometimes that one flash is good enough if you're ahead of the game. If your team's already ahead in numbers and you guys have a good post plant position, you're doing fine. You don't really need that flash. There's no reason to pick it up and the round's already pretty much secured. All you have to do is set up trades with your teammates and you should win. Now remember, at the end of the day, the only goal in the round is to win the round. It doesn't matter how you get there. What matters is that you do it. So if you can use one piece of utility, even in a lackluster way, and it'll get the job done and be faster, oftentimes it's going to be a lot better than having to back up and find that perfect piece of utility that might end up costing you too much time and losing you the round. Remember that time is a very valuable resource, so you don't want to use too much of it doing something that's perfect, when sometimes it's just best to do something that's good. Now let's talk about mistake number 4, not thinking about the scenario. You ever see a pro player and they'll do like TikTok clips, or it'll be on like a pro stream where they'll do something crazy, like jump out a window on Haven or something and get like 3 aces, just something ridiculous and completely impossible, right? But then you try to do it and you do the same exact thing that they did, the same flash, same jump out window or something, and you just get one tap. Like out of the air, you don't even hit the ground. It is pretty crazy the difference in execution a lot of the times, and why pros are doing things that people will just miss out on. Let's start with something simple, Sova darts. I think Sova darts are just a very simple piece of utility that are oftentimes misused greatly. So if you're going to dart on B site Ascent at the start of the round when your team is executing, oftentimes people will just throw it on the tree, which is fine. This is not a bad dart. Or they'll throw it on the draft. The problem oftentimes when people shoot these darts is that they're not timing it with their team's execute. They're using it way before, pretty much as soon as they can. They'll just rip the dart, and sometimes it'll get a tag and tell you that somebody stares, which is good info, I guess. But ideally, what you want is for that dart to be landing as your team can capitalize on it, as they're going in. If you're just firing off that dart whenever, people are just going to shoot it. The dart will fade, and then that person can take a duel unhindered or even reposition. They're not going to be tagged by that dart anymore, and they'll get the chance to actually fight. And oftentimes, they're going to win it. So it's not necessarily about what dart you're throwing, it's about when you're doing it. It is the timing of the dart that matters. That's the problem with lineups and setups that you copy from creators online, is that oftentimes players inconvenience themselves to use these things. You need a lineup that suits your situation, and if you need to break your timing to do that, it's oftentimes just not good enough. We've roasted lineups a bit in this video, and it's important to mention lineups can be incredible, but you need to find lineups that suit your playstyle. Lineups that fit where you're actually playing. You can't just run a mile away to shoot a recon dart because it looks cool or lands in a cool spot. You need that dart to land in sync with your team and allow you or someone on your team to capitalize on it. The same thing applies to things like post-plant mollies. Anyone can find a lineup that lands on top of the spike. All it takes is a couple minutes in a custom game. What you really need is a lineup that lands on the spike, fits the positions that you like to play in post-plant. A lineup that is not super inconvenient for you, that can keep you in the round, but is also safe enough for you to take advantage of. If you don't have this lineup, I'd almost argue it's not worth it to use a lineup at all. A well-timed molly or Sova dart is always going to be better than a poorly timed lineup, hands down. This is part of the reason that I get tilted when people say that you need lineups to play Sova. Maybe at a pro level, it's great to have all these random darts, but at the ranked level, all you need is good timing. All right, now let's talk about mistake number 5, and this one might surprise you. It's about not egoing enough. Now, if you had like a bell curve, it's like when you take low elo players, we're talking like really low elo. The ego thing is just far too much, right? They think they can win every gunfight and they don't really think about what they do, so they just swing stuff because they're bad. They don't really know what they're doing and they'll end up dying sometimes, but honestly, in low elo, it really doesn't matter because if their mechanics are half decent, they'll probably win. Then you take like the mid-tier players, right? And like this is where most people are. Gold, platinum, diamond area. These players know what it's like to get sat down from time to time. And especially when they're climbing, they're probably bottom fragging sometimes. Because of this, in a way, these players get afraid to take fights. Like, you don't really want to ego swing things because it's like, you never really know who you're swinging. It's good to play smart. And if the spike's ticking down, I wouldn't want to swing. I'd probably just want to take my time, right? Maybe just bait and try to play time. But then you get back to like the category of higher elo players again. And it's like, they'll just start ego checking people a lot. And it's because they know that if people can't stop them, they can get away with a lot of extra stuff. This can make it really easy to get an advantage in the game, and getting advantages is kind kind of the name of the game. It makes it a lot easier to carry if you can push your luck a little bit every now and then, which is kind of the problem when you go against these players who ego everything. Sometimes you have to shut them down. You just have to ego check them and just swing confidently. Stuff like this is going to catch them off guard. This is when you can also put people on tilt a lot of the times, is when you keep swinging them and fighting them and winning, because they're expecting you to play in the most strategic way all the time. They're expecting you to do what makes sense. But if you're confident and you have a 50-50 or a favorable duel anyway, sometimes it's just better to take that fight, end it there, and then boost your confidence a little bit. What you need to recognize in high elo is that every single player thinks they are the best player in the lobby. If you can't match that confidence, it's going to be very tough for you to play in those lobbies. Going back to our spike example, where the spike's down and the time's ticking away, you could continue to jump peek, maybe throw in a few jiggles. After all, the smart decision would probably be to play time, right? What you find oftentimes though is that people who try to go for those jiggles, it's either one of two scenarios. Either they're really confident and they know exactly what they're doing, or they're not confident at all and they end up dying while doing it anyway and losing the round. So at the end of the day, all it comes down to is just confidence. If you always make the safe decision, it's going to take a toll on your confidence. Sometimes you're going to have to take that fight, and when you do, I want you to think, I'm about to sit this guy down. All right, let's move on to mistake number 6, which is not thinking about your team's setups. We watched a recent silver VOD on the channel that you guys can actually go see, and they're doing just really silly stuff. They'll be double stacking site with Killjoy and Sage. We have a double sentinel set up over there, and then we end up in a retake when they go to the other site. And then we don't have any retake potential because we put both of our sentinels on one site. It just kind of sucks for us. All of that just comes down to, though, is just lack of awareness of your team's setup and how it relates to the map. There are certain areas of the map that favor different things. For example, let's take a look at a map like Pearl, which is coming back into the rotation. On Pearl, B site is kind of hard to hold. You just have this really long lane that there's not a lot of sight lines for defenders to take, and if you try to push up B long, it's just very committal. However, it's a really good site for an operator. If you could set up a jet with an operator or a Yoru, they can actually do a lot of work here. If you want to fight B long, you basically have to have like an Astra smoke deep, and then you have to have a lot of utility to hold the attackers back. And then again, you're very committed. It's not like you're getting out of there with any reasonable agent. So it can be tough for this reason. Now, if you want to hold it as Viper, what you can do is you can place your smoke on the edge, but the problem with that is that now you're letting the attackers walk all the way up B long for free. If you're not spotting for info or anything, especially if you're throwing the smoke up, it can be really tough to anchor B site. B site is more for denial and retakes. You end up coming in and retaking, and you have to play the post plan. Contrast this with the A site. The A site actually is a lot easier to hold. There's the entrance that you can stuff utility with. There's a lot of corners that they have to clear. It's kind of tough for them to take back site because there's a bunch of different entrances. It's hard to clear out dugout, not to mention that players can just spam the spike through the wall at any point in time. Taking A site can be kind of tough, and they almost want to split through art. Because of this site works pretty well for stall agents. Vipers, Omens, Killjoys. Viper can set up her wall, or she can set up her smoke orb on B, but playing towards the A site is a lot more effective for her molly. Basically, just placing anything that can clog up the choke point is going to be a lot more effective on A site. You don't necessarily need to push up. It's not as good for an operator, but it's a lot easier to stall. That's normally what you want to do on these sorts of maps. It's kind of important to understand how these maps work and where the agents excel in them if you really want to push your rank. Just know that, hey, I'm playing this agent's really good on this site for this reason, I should take advantage of that. If you're not thinking about the map and what your team has or what your team needs to actually help you win the rounds, then it's going to be really tough to rank up. All right, let's wrap this up with mistake number 7, not playing around your team's ultimate. The ultimate economy is something that's kind of developed over time in the game. I remember way back in the beta, people didn't really pick up ultimate orbs at all, which is really crazy if you think about how powerful ultimates are and how powerful they were. It might surprise a lot of you to hear that Brimstone, for example, at the start of the game had 6 ultimate charges for his ult. That means that he was on par with Phoenix. He could just pick up a bunch of ultimate orbs and he could use his orbital strike like literally every other round. And if I recall correctly, if it killed somebody, he would even get an ult charge for that. The funny thing with Brimstone too is that his orbital strike can be used for like free kills a lot of the times, especially in low elo. If you see somebody in a corner as Brimstone, you ult them and they're dead. There's not really much that they can do about it. Back then, nobody really thought about ultimates that much. Nowadays, everybody's doing it. As you get into lower ranks, people are thinking about who should plant and defuse the spike. People are maybe grabbing ultimate orbs a little bit more often. Not as often, but you should really be thinking about what ultimates you have online and what strategies that you can run with these ults to win the rounds. One of the big issues with Valorant right now is that if a team wins pistol round, not only are they getting an economy advantage, but oftentimes they're also getting an ultimate orb advantage. They're getting the spike down, they're picking up more ultimate orbs, they're getting a lot more kills, right? And they can use these things to snowball around. We have a breach ult, so we're going to use that to win this round. Now next round we have a killjoy ult, and we're going to use that to win that round. Now next round we have a Yoru ult, and we're going to use that to win that round. And it could snowball the game out of control where they always have these ultimates online that they can keep cycling through. So really keep in mind when these ultimates are available and try to think about what your next play is going to be based around that. If someone is close to their ultimate, maybe you have them seek out the last few kills on an eco and everybody follows them to trade them rather than everybody just running around crazily looking for kills. Now, obviously in ranked, this is going to be pretty hard to control. People are just going to do what they want to do. But this is ideally the best way that you can handle it. And if you're able to call out, hey, I'm close to my ult, can I get this defuse? Or hey, can I get this last kill? And people will listen, then more power to you. Alright though, before we wrap this up, let me tell you a little bit more about SkillCapped. So we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and we think that is a pretty crazy thing to offer. Like your local gym membership promising that you'll get ripped. Your gym would go bust if they offered you that. Not us though, we've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well in fact that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium Valorant guides on the internet. With over 500 guides created into over 50 courses, nobody else can compare. When users sign up, they also get direct access to our coaches in the Discord so that you can get personalized feedback just for you. Oftentimes our students will submit VOD reviews in Discord and we will take a look at them and give them feedback that will allow them to climb stupidly fast. So if you're really thinking about climbing this act in Valorant, then we highly recommend checking out SkillCapped using the link below. And other than that, my name's Casey. We'll catch you in the next one.